I still remember the way my hands shook that morning, though I told myself it was just the cold. It wasn't. It was the kind of tremor that comes when your heart already knows something your mind refuses to accept. 10 years. A full decade of my life. I used to think that if love could be measured in time, ours would be worth gold. Slive and I met in the most cliché yet magical way: college library, same desk, two stubborn people reaching for the same book. He smiled. I rolled my eyes. He teased. I ignored him. And yet, somehow, his presence lingered until it was everywhere, in my messages, in my weekends, in my future plans. He was my first real love, my only love, and I built my life around that fact. We didn't have everything at first: no fancy house, no money for luxuries, but we had dreams. One of them was Paris, the Eiffel Tower, the little CAFs, the streets that smelled of croissants and history. It was our promised trip. On our 10th anniversary, he once told me, we'll toast with champagne in Paris. No matter what, this year was that 10th anniversary. I woke up early that day, my mind buzzing with small surprises I had planned. A scrapbook of our memories, a home-cooked breakfast, and a wrapped little box containing the watch he had been eyeing for months. I wasn't expecting fireworks, just us. Just him looking at me like I was still the girl in the library who stole his book and his heart. But Slive didn't come home the night before. When I texted him, there was no reply. When I called, it went straight to voicemail. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. He had been busy with work lately. Maybe he had a late meeting. Maybe he crashed at a hotel near the office. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It wasn't him. It was a notification from social media. One of those trending now posts. I clicked without thinking. And there he was, Slive, in Paris, smiling under the Eiffel Tower. And next to him, a woman, tall, glamorous, with waves of dark hair spilling over a beige coat. Her hand was tucked into his arm like it belonged there. I couldn't breathe. The caption under the photo burned into me like acid. Business tycoon Slive Warner spotted vacationing in Paris with rumored flame Sophia Lane. Sophia. I knew that name. Not from tabloids, not from gossip. From my own home. She had sat on our couch once, sipping tea, laughing at my cooking disaster. She was just a friend from the industry, Slive had said back then. I stared at the screen so long my vision blurred. The comments were worse. People calling her an upgrade, saying how perfect they looked together. And my name, my existence, nowhere in the narrative. The scrapbook I had made for our anniversary sat on the table, open to the first page. A Polaroid of us, back when we had nothing but hope, was taped in the corner. The ink beneath it read, "To Paris someday." That someday was now. Just not with me. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I sat there, frozen, feeling the life I had built crumble like a sandcastle under a sudden wave. And for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't sure if I even knew the man I married. I must have stared at that photo for hours, replaying every interaction I'd ever had with Sophia in my mind. She wasn't just some stranger. She wasn't some nameless other woman you could detach from. She was real. She was familiar. And that made her dangerous. The first time I met her was at one of Slive's company events. She glided into the room like she owned it, every man's eyes following her, every woman's gaze narrowing. She wasn't intimidating because she tried to be. She simply existed in a way that made the rest of us feel like background noise. Slive had introduced her with a casual arm around my shoulder, saying, "This is Sophia Lane. She's a rising star in the industry." We're working on a few projects together. Back then, I was still naive enough to believe that working together meant just that. She had visited our home twice, once for tea, once for dinner. I remembered her laugh, like crystal breaking, and the way she looked at Slive just a second too long when he spoke. I had felt something then. Not suspicion, not exactly. Just the unease you feel when you're not sure if you're imagining things. Now, the truth slapped me in the face in the form of a Parisian backdrop and a hashtag that read, #couplegoals. I dialed his number. My hands ice cold. The ringtone barely lasted before it clicked to voicemail. I called again. This time, he answered, his voice casual, almost annoyed. Mia, what's wrong? I'm in the middle of something. What's wrong? I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. Are you in Paris? There was a pause. Then a sigh. Yes, I am. It's a work trip. A work trip, I echoed, staring at the photo again. With Sophia. Another pause, longer this time. She's a colleague. We look. You're overreacting. Don't start this drama. Drama. That's what he called it. 10 years of loyalty, love and shared dreams reduced to drama because I had the audacity to question why my husband was spending our anniversary in Paris with another woman. Slive, I said quietly, this was supposed to be our trip. Our promise. You're being unreasonable. You know how busy I've been. We'll celebrate later. And just like that, he hung up. I sat there, staring at my phone, my ears ringing from the silence he left behind. There it was. The truth. He didn't even try to deny it. Didn't even try to comfort me. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, replaying a decade of moments in my mind. Every late night I stayed up waiting for him. Every career opportunity I turned down so I could support his schedule. Every time I told myself, he loves you. That's enough. But love isn't supposed to make you feel invisible. And right now, I felt like a ghost in my own marriage. The next morning, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. My eyes were puffy, my skin dull, my hair lifeless. I used to be full of color inside and out. Now I was faded, and I knew, in the pit of my stomach, that I couldn't go on like this. I just didn't yet know how to stop. I used to think heartbreak was loud. The kind of thing that came with screaming matches, broken dishes, slammed doors. But the truth? It's quiet. So quiet, it seeps into you like water soaking through wood, until you can't tell where the ache ends and you begin. The days after that phone call blurred together. I didn't tell anyone, not my mother, not my closest friend, not even my co-worker who could read my moods like an open book. Part of it was shame, part of it was denial. But mostly, I didn't want to hear the pity in their voices. I moved like a shadow in my own home. I'd wake up in the mornings, make coffee, scroll through my phone only to see more Paris photos, Slive and Sophia at a wine tasting, Slive and Sophia on a Seine river cruise, Slive and Sophia laughing in a way I hadn't seen him laugh with me in years. Every image was another paper cut to my chest, and I was bleeding in places no one could see. At night, I'd lie in bed and listen to the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the ticking of the clock on the wall, the hollow emptiness of a house that once felt alive. I couldn't sleep. Instead, I'd reach for my phone, scroll through the folder of us photos and wonder when exactly the we in our story had turned into me and him. Meals became optional. Sometimes I'd just eat up soup and let it go cold before even touching it. Other times, I'd pour a glass of wine and sit by the window, watching the streetlights flicker, pretending I was somewhere else, someone else. I started avoiding mirrors. When I did catch my reflection, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes were dull, her hair was unkempt, her smile missing, and yet, in the middle of all this, something small began to shift. It started one Tuesday afternoon. I was wandering aimlessly through the grocery store when a flyer caught my eye. Beginner photography workshop, learn to see the world differently. For some reason, I picked it up. Maybe because I wanted to see anything differently. When I got home, I didn't sign up right away, but I kept the flyer. I set it on the kitchen counter where I could see it every morning. It became this little piece of paper that whispered, "There's still something out there for you." I didn't know it yet, but that flyer would be the first step toward the version of myself I thought I had lost forever. It took me a week to make the call. 7 days of staring at that flyer, of talking myself into it, and then out of it again. But one morning, as I sat at the kitchen table with my untouched coffee, I realized something. Slive wasn't coming home to fix me. No one was. So I dialed the number. The voice on the other end was warm, cheerful. "Yes, there's still a spot left in the beginner's photography workshop. We start this Thursday." Before I could change my mind, I said, "I'll take it." Thursday came faster than I expected. The class was held in a cozy little art studio tucked between a bakery and a bookstore. The smell of fresh bread drifted in every time the door opened, mingling with the faint scent of paint and old wood. There were maybe a dozen of us, different ages, different backgrounds, all clutching cameras like they were passports to a new world. That's when I met him. Ethan. He was adjusting the strap of his camera when I walked in, his brows furrowed in concentration. Not conventionally striking, but there was something about the way he looked at people, like he really saw them, that made you feel noticed. When our instructor asked us to pair up for a simple exercise, he ended up being my partner. "First time with a camera?" he asked, smiling in a way that wasn't patronizing, just curious. "First time in a while," I admitted. "I'm rusty." We were supposed to take photos of each other, practicing angles and light. I felt awkward at first, self-conscious, in a way I hadn't been in years. But he cracked small jokes. Nothing forced, just enough to make me relax. And when he showed me one of the photos he'd taken of me, I almost didn't recognize myself. It wasn't that I looked glamorous or different. It was that I looked alive, like there was still something in me worth capturing. The class became a quiet escape. Once a week, I'd slip into that little studio, breathe in the scent of fresh bread and coffee from next door, and let myself focus on framing the world instead of my pain. Ethan never pried, never asked why my smiles sometimes seemed heavy. But there was a gentleness in his presence that felt like sunlight after weeks of rain, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't sadness. I didn't know then that this small flicker was the start of a fire that would change everything. For a little while, I thought I had found a safe rhythm. Photography class on Thursdays. Quiet. Mornings with coffee. Evenings spent experimenting with shots in my living room or around the neighborhood. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was something close to breathing again. That piece lasted exactly 2 weeks. I was halfway through editing a photo when my phone buzzed with a message from my friend Hannah. She rarely texted me during work hours, so my first instinct was that something urgent had happened. The message was short. "Mia, please don't freak out. But you need to see this. There was a link. I clicked it. And there they were. Slive and Sophia, front and center, on a celebrity gossip site. This time, it wasn't just a blurry fan photo. It was a full-blown paparazzi spread dozens of high-quality shots from their Paris trip. Sophia laughing as Slive wrapped an arm around her waist. Slive feeding her a bite of dessert across a candlelit table. The two of them walking along the Seine at night, the Eiffel Tower glittering in the background like it was blessing them. The headline made me feel physically ill. Business power couple. Slive Warner and Sophia Lane's Paris romance steals hearts. Power couple. Romance steals hearts. My marriage wasn't even mentioned. No one reading that article would know I existed. And in the few comments where someone did bring me up, they called me a boring wife and dead weight. They didn't know my name, but they were certain they knew my worth. I put my phone down and just stared at the wall. It was strange how something could hurt so much you almost didn't feel it at first. Like your body had to process the blow before your mind could catch up. When it did, the tears came fast, hot and unstoppable. That night, I didn't go to bed. Instead, I sat at my desk, flipping through old photographs our early years together. Back when we had nothing but ramen dinners and second-hand furniture. Back when he used to look at me like I was his whole world. Now, he was looking at her. Like that. I didn't answer Hannah's follow-up messages. I didn't answer my mother's call. I just stayed in the quiet, letting the hurt spread through me until it became something else, something harder, sharper. The next morning, I walked into photography class with puffy eyes. Ethan noticed, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he handed me a cup of coffee and said, "Let's go shoot outside today. The light's perfect." I followed him, and for the first time since the article, I felt the smallest spark of control. Maybe I couldn't rewrite the headlines, but I could choose the story I told with my own lens, and I was starting to realize maybe it was time I started telling my own story again. It's strange how life works sometimes. One moment, you're barely holding yourself together, and the next, something small shifts and you realize you're not as broken as you thought. For me, it started with a photo. Not one of Slive or Sophia. One of my own. It was from an afternoon shoot in the park with Ethan. We'd been practicing depth of field, and I'd taken a candid shot of an elderly couple sitting on a bench. The man was leaning toward the woman, whispering something, and she was laughing, this pure, full laugh that lit up her entire face. I posted it on my small photography account with the caption, "Love, when it's real, doesn't fade with time." I didn't expect much, but somehow the post caught fire. People started sharing it, commenting. Some even sent me stories of their own grandparents or parents, inspired by the photo. It was the first time in months I felt like something I'd done mattered. A week later, I was invited to participate in a local art fair. My first instinct was to say no. What if I wasn't good enough? What if people didn't care? But Ethan looked at me with that steady calm of his and said, "You have an eye for moments, Mia. People need to see them." So I said yes. The day of the fair, I wore a simple white blouse and jeans, my hair pulled back. I didn't dress to impress, I dressed to feel like myself. And people came. They stopped at my little booth, looked at my photos and smiled. Some bought prints. Some asked if I did portraits. Every single compliment felt like a thread stitching something back together inside me. And then he showed up, Slive, in a crisp suit, sunglasses on, as if the art fair was some corporate event he had to attend. "Didn't know you were doing this," he said, glancing at my display like he couldn't quite decide if it impressed him or irritated him. "It's new," I said simply, arranging a few prints. He gave a short laugh. "Looks like you've been keeping busy." It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation, and something in his tone told me he hadn't expected me to be doing anything at all. I didn't try to explain. I didn't ask him why he was really there. I just turned back to a customer and let him stand there, watching me. For the first time in years, I realized I didn't feel small in his presence. And judging by the way his jaw tightened, I think he felt that too. The days after the confrontation at the restaurant felt like walking through fog. Every step I took seemed muffled, every thought heavy. I'd expected a fight from Slive when I exposed him in front of everyone, but instead, he'd been eerily calm, too calm. And when calmness comes from someone who's wronged you, it's never a good sign. 2 nights later, I found out why. It was a Wednesday evening. The rain outside was a gentle drizzle, the kind that made the world seem quieter than it really was. I had just finished replying to some client emails when my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. I hesitated before opening it, my instinct screaming at me that nothing good would come from this. It was a picture of Slive. In a luxury hotel room with her, that same girl from the restaurant. And beneath the picture, the message read, "Thought you should know where your husband really spends his nights." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. I wasn't sure if it was anger or heartbreak causing it, maybe both. I wanted to throw my phone across the room, scream, demand answers. But instead, I found myself sinking onto the couch, the weight of 10 years pressing down on my chest. I replayed our anniversary over and over again. The way he'd grinned when he talked about their trip. The way he'd made me feel invisible. And now I had proof that I wasn't paranoid. It wasn't just emotional betrayal anymore. It was physical. It was deliberate. That night, when Slive came home, I was waiting for him in the living room. No lights, just the soft glow from the street lamp filtering through the blinds. He looked surprised to see me still awake, but not guilty. Not even a little. "Working late again?" I asked, my voice calm to calm. He raised an eyebrow. "You're acting weird." I held up my phone, showing him the picture without a word. For the first time in weeks, his expression shifted. A flicker of something shock, annoyance, I couldn't tell, crossed his face before he quickly masked it. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his tone suddenly sharp. "Does it matter?" I replied, "It's you. It's her." On our 10th anniversary week, he didn't even deny it, just sighed, as if I was some inconvenient obstacle in his life. "Mia, relationships get complicated. We've been together a long time. Maybe I just needed something different for a while." I felt my chest tighten, but my voice remained steady. "Something different? You mean someone different?" While still keeping me around to cook, clean, and play the part of the perfect wife. He didn't answer, and that silence said more than words ever could. That was the moment something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. I realized I wasn't afraid of losing him anymore. I was afraid of losing myself if I stayed. That night, I started planning. Not a screaming match, not revenge that would leave me just as bitter as him, but a clean, strategic exit. If Slive wanted to flaunt his mistress, fine. I would make sure the next time he saw me, I'd be someone he could never touch again. Someone untouchable, someone free. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that woman's face, smug, flawless, painted with the confidence of someone who thought she had already won. And Slive's eyes. They weren't the eyes of a man who had been caught in a mistake. They were the eyes of someone who didn't think he owed me an explanation at all. Bam. I gave up on sleep. I pulled my laptop onto my lap and started searching. The thing about people like Slive and his mistress was that they always left trails. Social media posts that they thought were private. Hotel check-ins under different names. Corporate expense reports with odd business trips that coincidentally matched her travel photos, and there it was, a picture from 2 years ago. They had been to Bali together. It was the exact same week he had told me he was in Singapore for a conference. The caption on her photo was vague, something like "some moments are too precious to share." But I remembered that week vividly. I had been at home, sick with the flu, and he had sent me one short text: "Get some rest." The laptop screen blurred as tears welled up. 2 years. They had been doing this for at least 2 years. It was strange. I wasn't just angry. I felt played, as if my life had been a stage and I had been the background character in his love story all along. By morning, I was exhausted but strangely calm. I decided I wasn't going to confront him again, not yet. No, I wanted him to think I was still the same Mia. The quiet, loyal Mia. The Mia who waited at home while he lived his double life. So when he woke up and casually mentioned that he might have to fly to Singapore again next month, I smiled. "That's fine," I said, pouring him coffee. "Just let me know the dates." He looked at me for a second longer than usual, as if something felt off, but then shrugged. Over the next few days, I began my quiet mission. I spoke to a lawyer, not to file anything yet, but to understand my options. I went to the bank and checked all our accounts. There were transfers I had never noticed before, small enough to avoid suspicion, but consistent money flowing to an account I didn't recognize. I started taking back pieces of myself too. I stopped cooking dinner for him every night. I stopped waiting up when he said he'd be working late. And I started dressing differently, not for him, but for me. Then, one afternoon, as I was going through some old boxes in the storage room, I found something unexpected: a small red velvet jewelry box. Inside was a necklace. Elegant, expensive, and I had never seen it before. Tucked underneath was a receipt. It was dated 4 years ago. The name on the invoice, hers. I sat there on the floor, holding it, feeling my heartbeat slow into something heavy and steady. This wasn't just a recent affair. Slive had been betraying me for almost half our marriage. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to just walk away. I was going to make sure that when I left, Slive would have nothing: not my love, not my loyalty, and certainly not the comfort of walking away without consequences. And the first step would begin on our anniversary trip, the one he thought he'd be spending with her, because I had just booked myself a ticket to the exact same destination. The plane touched down with a gentle rumble, and as I stepped into the warm Parisian air, a strange mix of nerves and determination coursed through me. This was supposed to be their celebration, their stolen dream, but I wasn't here to watch from the sidelines anymore. I rented a small apartment near the Seine, not far from the places Slive and Sophia were flaunting on their glossy Instagram stories. Every cobblestone street, every quaint CAF was a reminder of promises broken, of a future I had once imagined. But now this city was my battlefield. Ethan had been supportive, when I told him my plan not to confront, but to reclaim my power. "You deserve more than to be someone's secret," he said gently. "Whatever you do here, do it for yourself." And that's exactly what I intended. The first few days, I wandered the city with my camera, capturing moments of real love and life. An old couple holding hands, children chasing pigeons in the park, lovers sharing quiet smiles on a bench. Each photo was a statement. I was still here. I still mattered. Then, the night of our anniversary arrived. I had heard through a mutual acquaintance about a lavish gala. Slive was attending a charity event where Sophia would undoubtedly be on his arm. Instead of avoiding it, I bought a ticket. When I arrived, the room buzzed with champagne glasses clinking and murmurs of Parisian high society. Slive's eyes immediately found me across the crowd. The look he gave was a mixture of shock and something darker, resentment, fear. I smiled, calm and radiant in a simple black dress that fit me perfectly. He approached, trying to wear the charm I once loved like armor. "Mia," he said, voice low, "what are you doing here?" "Celebrating," I replied. "Myself?" As the night unfolded, whispers spread. People who had only ever known me as Slive's wife were now seeing me as my own person, confident, graceful and unbroken. And then Sophia appeared, her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. The tension was electric. I didn't say a word to her. I didn't need to. The message was clear. This city, this night, this life, I wasn't stepping aside anymore. That night, I realized something crucial. Slive might have taken my past, but I was taking back my future. The gala that night marked more than just an anniversary. It was a turning point. By the time the event ended, I had exchanged numbers with a few gallery owners impressed by my photography work. Ethan had introduced me to several contacts who could help me organize my first solo exhibition in Paris. For the first time in years, my future felt like it belonged to me and me alone. Slive tried to pull me aside after the gala. His voice was smooth, calculated. "Mia, we need to talk." I looked at him with steady eyes. "I think the talking is over," I said, letting the words hang in the air like a final verdict. He faltered for a moment, realizing that I wasn't the same woman he had taken for granted for 10 years. Sophia stood nearby, her expression flickering with unease. For the first time, it seemed the Mistress wasn't untouchable. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into my work. The exhibition was small but powerful. Every piece told a story of resilience, of heartbreak turned into art. People came from across the city, some familiar faces from my past, most strangers. But they all left seeing me not as Slive's wife, not as someone defined by betrayal, but as Mia. And the strangest thing, the more I thrived, the more Slive noticed. Emails came, asking about my life, my projects. He tried subtle messages, invitations to meet and talk. I ignored them. Every glance he gave me in public was tinged with frustration. He wanted control, and control was no longer mine to give. One morning, while sipping coffee in a quaint cafe near the Louvre, Ethan slid into the seat across from me. "You've changed," he said, his voice warm but teasing. "Paris suits you." I laughed softly, realizing how far I had come. "Yes," I admitted. "It does. And you know what? I finally feel like I belong to myself again." That night, walking along the Seine, camera in hand, I took a deep breath. The city lights shimmered on the water like tiny stars, and for the first time since Slive's betrayal, I smiled without reservation. I didn't need revenge to feel powerful. I didn't need to humiliate him publicly. I only needed to rise, and in doing so, I had already won. Paris wasn't just the city of love. It was the city of my rebirth. By now, Paris had become my sanctuary. Every street, every CAF, every shadowed alley seemed to echo the story of who I had become. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. Slive, of course, had not given up. He sent emails, messages, even attempted calls that I deliberately ignored. But the more he tried, the more apparent it became that I was no longer the Mia who would bend, plead, or forgive blindly. One afternoon, as I prepared for a gallery meeting, I glanced at my phone. There was again a message from Slive, brief and formal. "We need to discuss our future." I smiled. Not out of happiness, but out of clarity. My future had nothing to do with him anymore. I didn't reply. I deleted it and continued reviewing my portfolio. Later that day, at the gallery, I met investors and artists who genuinely appreciated my vision. Their questions weren't about my past, my marriage, or my heartbreak. They were about my perspective, my eye for emotion, my ability to capture life in frames. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not as someone attached to a man, but as Mia, an individual, an artist, a woman with her own story. Then Ethan joined me for a quick lunch. His presence was comforting, familiar, yet entirely supportive. He didn't overshadow my growth. He complemented it. "You've built something amazing," he said, sipping his coffee. "Not many people could have turned pain into art like this." I laughed softly, feeling a warmth that had little to do with the CAF as sunlight. It's funny. I used to think love defined me. Now I know my passion does. Even Slive's interference couldn't touch me. His messages became more desperate, more calculated, but each one reminded me that I had the power he once held. The gallery exhibition opened to critical acclaim. My photos of intimate, quiet moments, the couple laughing on the park bench, the child chasing pigeons, the old man feeding birds, resonated with viewers in a way that I hadn't imagined possible. People lined up to buy prints, ask for commissions, and hear the story behind each image. I realized then that healing wasn't about making him regret it. It wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about proving to myself that I was enough. Paris wasn't just the city of my rebirth. It was the place where I reclaimed every piece of my life Slive had tried to control, and where I finally learned that freedom, true, unshakable freedom, was far more beautiful than revenge. Months had passed since that fateful anniversary, and Paris had become more than a backdrop. It was the canvas of my new life. Every morning, I walked the streets with my camera in hand, capturing fleeting moments of beauty, laughter, and love. Each click of the shutter reminded me that I was no longer defined by betrayal, heartache, or a man who had once taken me for granted. Slive's attempts to reach me had dwindled to silence. He had realized, too late, that the woman he thought he could manipulate no longer existed. The Mia who waited, who hoped, who bent herself into his world, she was gone. One evening, while preparing for a new exhibition featuring the vibrant life of Paris streets, Ethan met me at the CAF, where we often discussed ideas. His eyes held a mix of admiration and something more, something deeper that had grown alongside my own healing. "You've built something extraordinary here, Mia," he said softly. "Not just the art, but yourself." I smiled, a smile unburdened by the past. I never realized what freedom felt like until I lost everything I thought I needed. Ethan reached across the table, gently taking my hand. Maybe losing him was the first step toward finding everything else. I nodded, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. The past decade's heartbreak, betrayal, and sorrow had been a crucible, forging a stronger, wiser, and more resilient version of myself. The night of my exhibition opening, the gallery was alive with light, music, and admiration. Every photograph told a story not of Slive or Sophia, but of Mia, a woman who had walked through fire and emerged unbroken. Friends, strangers, and even past acquaintances approached to congratulate me, marveling at the depth and emotion captured in each frame. From across the room, I caught a glimpse of someone familiar, Slive. He stood awkwardly near the entrance, surrounded by whispers and curious glances. Our eyes met, and for the first time, I saw regret and the realization that he no longer had a place in my life. I turned back to my work, to the people who had seen me for who I truly was, and I felt a surge of liberation. Paris had not only witnessed my heartbreak, but had also seen my rebirth. I was no longer a shadow in someone else's life. I was the author of my own story, and as I stepped outside into the crisp night air, the sun shimmering under the city lights, I finally understood. Love was not about possession, control, or fear. True love began with oneself. For the first time in years, I was free, and in that freedom, I was unstoppable. Mia stood on the balcony of her Paris apartment, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. The Seine flowed quietly below, carrying with it the echoes of the past, but she no longer felt their weight. 10 years of love, loyalty, and heartbreak had brought her here not broken, but reborn. She had faced betrayal, humiliation, and loss. Yet she had discovered something far more powerful: herself. Her heart was no longer tethered to someone who didn't see her worth. Instead, it was free, open to life, to opportunity, and maybe, when the time was right, to love that was mutual and true. Ethan's laughter drifted from the CAF below, and she allowed herself a small smile. Life was still unfolding, and now she had the pen firmly in her hand. Paris had witnessed her heartbreak, but it had also witnessed her triumph. And as the first light of dawn touched the city, Mia knew one thing with absolute certainty: she was unstoppable. And past, no betrayal, no one shadow could ever dim her light again. Her story wasn't defined by loss, it was defined by courage, resilience, and the freedom to finally live on her own terms. And with that, Mia stepped forward, ready to embrace the life she had always deserved. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, spread love.